So let's go ahead and ask everybody, what is self-awareness?
I think it's what we know about ourselves or believe that we know about ourselves and how it relates to how that impacts other people and how aware we are of that impact and how we use that knowledge.
All right, thank you, Bo.
Yeah,
Anybody?
it's Mike. I would say just being able to see ourselves and the way we act and the way we are, being as transparent as possible to ourselves.
Thank you, Mike. One more person, perhaps? Well, thank you, Bo and Mike, for sharing. So what I'm going to share with you is a definition by a lady whose name is Tasha Eurich, and you see her name at the bottom of the screen, and she just authored a book called Insights. And she's a leadership coach, and her niche is self-awareness. So what she says is that self-awareness is a combination of who we are and how we're seen by others, right? So that's what she calls internal and external self-awareness. And so somebody who is an internally self-aware person is somebody who clearly can see their own values, passions, aspirations, who can fit with their environment and understands their reactions, like their thoughts, feelings, behaviors, strengths, and weaknesses, and their impact on others. External self-awareness means understanding how other people view us, and in terms of the factors that I just mentioned. And so their research shows that people who know how others see them are more skilled at showing empathy and taking other people's perspectives into considerations. So this is pretty much the combination. And so it doesn't, when you are very strong on one type of self-awareness, it doesn't mean you're weak on the other or the other way around. They can be just as high or just as low. Okay. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute. By the way, let me ask you, how many of you took the self-assessment before today's Coach Connect? You can say yes or raise your thumb. Kathy did, Bo did. Okay, Lisa says no. How about Mike and Patricia?
No, I didn't. I've taken a jillion self-assessments prior to this, but I did not take this one. So,
all right, no problem, Mike. No problem. But I'll talk to you about it in just a moment because it's really interesting. So we're going to do a little moment of self-awareness, a little mindfulness exercise. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to close your eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. And now remember a time when someone gave you candid feedback that included comments about something that needed improvement. What was your reaction and how did you respond to it? And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Now remember a time when you had to give feedback to another person that required improvement in a task, in a habit, in how they showed up. What did you have to take into consideration before that conversation? And how was your message received? Take a few seconds here. And the last question is, based on these two experiences, what did you learn about yourself? And I'm asking this from a curiosity standpoint and not criticism. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see who would like to take a minute and share what their thoughts were.
Start, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
My rule of thumb is I always have to put myself in the other person's position before I react or before I have a meeting with them and discuss things. I always try to put myself in their shoes first and see how I would react to it. So it helps me anticipate. So in the case of the individual that gave me feedback, the first thing I said was, really? And that's really the way that you perceive that situation? She said, yes, it is. I said, well, then I need to really focus on modifying my behavior when I get into those kind of situations. And the comment, the secret was, sometimes you get upset, more upset than you should when people disagree with you. And as far as giving feedback to others, you don't want to put them on the defensive. And I know if it's constructive, you try to make it constructive feedback. But it's also, if it's can be perceived the least bit negative, they don't typically feel it's constructive. So you have to have specific examples and be in a position that it's not just you. At the same time, I typically will tell them, look, this is one person's opinion. Mike Gillen doesn't define me as an individual. But I owe you the opinion because I owe to be truthful to you and give you any kind of feedback that I think might help you be even better. But I'm one person, and it doesn't mean I'm right. I've made many mistakes in the past, so you can take it for that. I guess what did I see in myself after all that is I really do try to be caring. I really do try to spend a lot of time, invest the effort in perceiving things from other people's perspective before I act. But I do sometimes try less and less these days, now that I've gotten the feedback, to get less, I guess, aggravated when someone disagrees with me. So that's about it.
Thank you so much for sharing. Mike, I just want to let you know that sometimes you're breaking up a little bit. And so,
Oh, really?
we missed a couple of words that you said, but I think overall we understood everything that you were trying to share with us. Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to? Bo, I see that you're speaking, but you're muted. Okay, whoopsies.
For me, it goes back to the first time I ever received 360 feedback. I thought I was prepared for it because I thought the world was rosy, that I was doing everything that I was supposed to do to the best of my abilities, and that everybody understood my heart and why I did the things I did. And when the person that gave me the feedback saw my reaction, I was shocked. I didn't get defensive. I asked questions, why, what, can you give me an example? And she couldn't. And at the end of the conversation, she asked me why I got so upset. And the only way I knew how to tell her was to give her a metaphor and just say that, what you told me, or what I'm hearing, is that the mirror that I've been looking in for my entire life has been lying to me. If what you say is true, then how I see me is completely different than how I see the world. And she couldn't help me through that. And I know for a year what it felt like trying to come to grips with it and trying to figure out what to do with it. So what's happened with that though is it's fed into my practice in terms of how I give feedback. It's not just putting myself in the other person's shoes, but helping the other person understand what the feedback means. Because it's not about what the mirror says, it's about what other people see in the mirror. Because I'm still the same person, but it's how they know me through the experience, and it's understanding intentions and all these other things, and how our styles impact that, but so I spend a lot of time really trying to help people understand what feedback is about. And it's not about how they are, who they are. It's about how people experience who they are. And what I've learned, especially over the past few years, is when I've been really intentional about that, people seem to take the feedback in a way that's more constructive than destructive. And take pieces that they don't understand and not dwell on them, but also keep them in mind. So
That's very caring and that's very thoughtful of you, Bo, because I think the majority of the times when we get that 360 feedback, we don't know where it comes from. Maybe somebody filled out the assessment on a bad day or whatever, and it's really awkward, right? That feeling that you did something wrong and you don't even know what you did. I remember myself having to give some constructive feedback to one of my staff members who, I absolutely adored, but she had body odor. And I dreaded that conversation until, I figured out and I found the words and the right moment to say what I had to say in a way that was very caring and meant well. It came from a good place, and it was taken the way it was intended. But it was so hard for me to do, and it took me a while before I found that courage, right, to do that. I want to welcome Martha with us today. All right, so
how are you, everybody?
hey, Martha. So self-awareness, according to Daniel Goleman, who's the emotional intelligence guru, you may all have heard of him. Self-awareness is part of the emotional intelligence package of skills, and it's a combination of emotional awareness, accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence. So here is something really funny that I want to share with you. Oops. All right. People who believe they're self-aware versus people who are actually self-aware. What do you think is the ratio? Or the percentages, actually?
Oh, I would say that the vast majority believe that they're self-aware.
That's % believe they're self-aware.
How many, Mike?
80% believe they're self-aware, and actually the people who are self-aware is probably closer to, I'm going to say 15%.
Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
So 95% of people, according to recent research, believe they are self-aware, and people who are actually self-aware is no higher than 10-15%. So much so that there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what this means is that the more incompetent people are, the more likely they are to overestimate their abilities. This is almost hilarious, right? But it's so true. And so why is that? The reason is because some people can have a false sense of confidence about their performance. Sometimes they may overvalue their skills. And let's think of organizations or people in general, right? Even in government, right? You may have few people who provide you candid feedback. Who are you surrounded by, and who can you rely on that you are comfortable with to give you candid feedback? And then also the more of an influencer you are, or in an organization, the higher you are in the hierarchy, the less comfortable people are to give you feedback. And so you're kind of alone sometimes, okay? But there's also the fact that the world in which we live is increasingly overconnected. We're overworked, we're overwired, we're overwhelmed. We're driven by deadlines, competition, shrinking budgets, increased pressure. And then the quality human interactions and introspections have become more and more limited. And as a result, society has become more self-absorbed and less self-aware. So the cult of the self is pretty prevalent in our society. So that explains that effect, right? So I know that some of you took the assessment. Martha, can you tell us if you took the assessment or not?
Yes, I did. However, even though my friend did complete the survey, I did not get the results.
Okay. All right. I think you will anytime really soon. When I did it, it was within 24 hours. Actually, it was just a few hours. But let me share that assessment that I shared with you. It also comes from Tasha Urich's website. And basically because self-awareness is both internal and external, there are a series of questions that you answer from your point of view. And then you ask a good friend of yours or somebody that knows you really well to take that same self-assessment. And their results are completely anonymous. Well, you know who that person is, but you'll never see the results. And then you get the actual total, if you will, and they'll email it to you. And so when you get your results, you're going to see that basically you fall into 4 different categories. And so the categories are as follows, right? When you have low internal self-awareness combined with low external self-awareness, you end up being a seeker. And a seeker is a person who really doesn't know who they are, who they stand for, what they stand for, and how other people see them. And as a result, they may feel stuck or frustrated in both their personal and professional life. Then you have somebody who has a low internal self-awareness, but a high external self-awareness. Can anybody guess what kind of person that is? We have a lot of those. They're the people pleasers, right? So the people pleasers are so focused on appearing a certain way to others that they can overlook what really matters to them. And over time, they tend to make choices that do not support what they truly stand for, their success or their fulfillment. And then we have people who have high internal self-awareness and low external self-awareness. And we call those the introspectors. So the introspectors are very clear on who they are, but they don't challenge their own views and they don't get feedback from others. And so this can, as a result, harm their relationships and limit their success. Then we have the actual people who are aware because they have both high internal and external self-awareness, right? They know who they are, they know what they stand for, they know what they want to accomplish. And there are 7 insights of self-aware people. They live their values, they know what they're passionate about, they know what their aspirations are in both work and life. They understand where they fit in terms of environment. They understand the patterns of their personality, why they have certain reactions, and their impact on others. And as a result of that, Tasha says that leaders or people who are self-aware are much more successful, much more promotable, productive, efficient, confident, better communicators, more respected by others, and they lead more profitable companies. And in their personal life, they're happier in relationship, have deeper and lasting friendships, and they're raised around well-rounded children. So I have a question for you. What are the characteristics of a self-aware coach? I'm going to stop sharing and let's open mics.
Good listener.
Good listener for sure. Yeah.
Aware when they're getting triggered in a coaching
I
session.
think that, hi, I'm Patricia. I think that a self-aware coach is a good listener and really is in tune to the other person, but also is aware of who they are and how they are coming across. And the way they ask questions, and if it's face-to-face, the way their tone, their body language, their facial expressions, they're very much aware of how that is being interpreted by the other person. Because sometimes we ask a question and we genuinely are curious, but it comes across as an attack because we're not aware of who we are and how forceful we can be. So to me, a self-aware coach is not only aware of all of those fantastic coaching skills that we have, but also aware of how they are perceived by the other person. And when we are, I'll use me as an example. I'm extremely curious, and I will dig and dig and dig because I genuinely am curious. But my friends have told me, yeah, stop, because it's intrusive and unnerving. And so I had to learn that what my curiosity is coming across. So I have to figure out how to maintain my curiosity, but keep the lines of communication open without intimidating or running everybody off.
Isn't that true? We can certainly do that. Yeah, I think Kathy was saying something earlier, but her mic was mute. Kathy, want to go ahead?
Sure. I was saying that one of the characteristics I think of a self-aware coach is one who knows when they're personally getting triggered in a conversation. Also helpful to know how the coach is perceived in the client's eyes, and when you're possibly intentionally or unintentionally triggering a response in the client.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Do we have anybody else? How do you see yourselves as a coach? Are you a self-aware coach? If yes, why? Martha, come on.
Well, I think that I am, yes, self-aware, but I'm more aware of the others. I'm more aware of the coachee, and I respond accordingly. Like I like to read body language, I like to read tone, I like to read, like what is between the lines. But sometimes I think that I'm not that conscious of myself, you know, like, so, or how am I coming across? And I think it could happen to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens to everybody for sure. Any other comments before we move on?
I would like to think that I am a self-aware coach, but I'm also very much aware that there are times when I'm not, you know, because I am human and I have those moments when, as Kathy said, you're triggered. And then there are those other times that I deliberately trigger my client, but it was a conscious act. And, you know, we're human and we toddle sometimes back and forth, and we have to understand and can't beat ourselves up every time we become unaware.
Mm-hmm.
Just one other comment. I think you can determine whether you're a self-aware coach in many cases by the number of people that are willing to give you candid feedback because they feel comfortable with you as an individual. If you don't have many people willing to give you candid feedback, regardless of what level you are, you might want to look internally.
Yeah. And be open to it, right? Like Bo was saying at the beginning, right? Be open to whatever feedback you are receiving. And sometimes, it may hurt. It may hurt, but the whole purpose is, to become better at what we do.
I also think too, part of it is recognizing that we're very good at lying to ourselves. Our ego is a very powerful thing, and we work really, really hard to protect it. And as long as you keep that front of mind, I can't say that you'll always be self-aware, but you're more likely to be more self-aware.
Great point. That's a great point. All right, let's keep sharing over here. And because we all realize that, because we're coaches, hopefully we're really self-aware, but we want to become more self-aware. And also we want to help our clients become more self-aware. Then what are some things that we can do to increase that? And so I'd like to share with you four tools. The first two are extremely important. So number one is asking what questions to find our why. And so where does that come from? It's a lot of times, when we beat ourselves up, let's say that I tell myself, why do I like this client more than this other client, right? So I want to understand my emotions or my behavior. Why did I mess up so badly in the last session? Or perhaps our attitude. Why am I so against my client's beliefs? I'm just sharing some possible examples here. So we keep asking ourselves that why question, right? And so the thoughts, feelings, and motives we're searching for our unconscious. And as a result, we jump to conclusions. And we're confident that we're right. And because the human mind rarely operates in a rational fashion and our judgments are seldom free from bias, right? Or we like to lie to ourselves, like Bo says, we tend to believe whatever insights we find within ourselves without questioning their validity or their value. And we may ignore any contradictory evidence. And we force our thoughts to conform to our initial explanations. So asking why questions not only may be a lie to ourselves, perhaps, but it can also create some negative thoughts, or fears or insecurities, rather than a rational assessment of our strengths and weaknesses. So A lot of times when we ponder why, we end up getting really sad or maybe anxious, right? And maybe not really getting any real answers. But when we ask a what question, then it helps us stay objective and future focused and empowered to act on our insights. So an example might be, instead of asking myself, why wasn't I able to turn the situation around and beat myself up? Ask myself instead, what can I do differently to make things better next time? Right? So hopefully it makes sense. And so I want to.
One is looking backward, the other one is looking forward.
There you go. Thank you, Bo. I like the way you put it very well. So, and one will never have an answer, or perhaps a very limited answer, right? And the other one, the what question, is always open. So, I want you to think right now, either yourself or a client, and if you feel comfortable enough, let's figure out an example of a question that might have started as a why, and then we turn that into a what. Welcome, Carissa.
Hey, great to connect with everyone.
So the question again is, what's an example of a why question that we can turn into a what question that we can ask ourselves or we can ask a client? Anybody?
I have one. Instead of why are you scared, what feels at risk?
Awesome.
I have another one, like instead of why do you do that, what drives you?
I'm writing them down in the chat. So instead of why are you afraid, ask what is at risk. All right. Instead of, Martha, can you repeat?
Yes, why do you do that? Ask what drives you?
Awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, mine didn't start with what, but it's, can you give me some insight into what's going on?
Into what's going on. One more?
Well, this is one that I used with a client that I was working with that's a principal. And it was the one way of putting it is, why are you hesitant to have a central planning room? Instead of asking, what can you do to make a central planning room more appealing to the teachers?
All right, I've added all of those to the chat. Please feel free to add more if you want. And to me, when I heard this, that was like a big aha moment. Although I've known all this time to ask what questions, the difference between what it's like to ask a why question versus a what question was crystal clear. And I am getting into the habit, as a coach, of asking a lot more what questions instead of why questions. And sometimes my instinct is to begin with why, and then I catch myself and then switch that to a what question, right? because like Bo says, you know, it is more future focused, it's more open, it's open to possibilities. Any other comments about that?
The what is really a place of curiosity and helps the client go to that place of envisioning the future. As Bo was saying, you know, as coaches, we like to ask, what do you want to feel as you go into that meeting? Or what do you want the outcome to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember so many times in IPEC school, they would say, don't ask, how are you feeling, but what are you feeling? And that too is a very different question, right? Talk about body sensations and again, you know, it's a question with curiosity that we ask ourselves. All right, the second tool to increase self-awareness is to exercise the power of choice. And so some of us have heard about the power of choice from Stephen Covey, some of them from Viktor Frankl. So wherever that came from, the point here when it comes to self-awareness is the power of freedom stands in contrast to the mindset. So are you willing to stay a victim, right? Or have the mindset of victimhood for forever and ever, and the culture of blaming, you know, which is so prevalent in our society? Or are you going to be more proactive and, for example, face a challenge, whatever that may be? So being able to be on the driver's seat of our own life versus allowing life to happen to us, right? And I've seen that a lot in clients, that they can spend endless amounts of time in this victim type of mindset, and they default back to that over and over and over. So there's a power of choice that we can exercise. Any comments on that? The third tool I want to share with you.
One
I'm
comment
sorry.
that just popped up,
Sure.
Susanna. I mean, helping clients look inward for their own choices is so powerful. Sometimes we don't even realize when we're in the victim state. And in a training I was in recently, they were saying even how we ask questions as coaches, like, you know, how is the pandemic treating you, or things like that. It can seem like this great, you know, empathetic question, but even in the wording of the question, it's putting them in more of a responsive state of, I'm in this really difficult situation, and that's driving it, rather than asking, you know, how are you walking through this time? What's your internal barometer doing in these days? And they really get to look in rather than look out at the situation.
Thanks for sharing, Carissa. Yeah, you know, every time I share with clients about the power of choice, it's this big aha moment, right? Sometimes they don't realize how much every decision that they make at every moment can have a different result. And, you know, a lot of people are just unaware of this. The third tool is living our values to overcome challenges. And here, The point is that when we're true to our values, we know what kind of person we want to be. We know what's the right thing to do. And it creates consistency and trust, and it gives meaning to the work that we do. A lot of times when we're faced with decision making or very difficult things to solve, when we look into our values and we're true to our values, we know that we're going to make the right choice every single time. And so I want to ask you, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to ask, number 4. Sorry about that. There's one more. It's the trinity of self-awareness, committing to that trinity of self-awareness, which consists in know thyself, improve thyself, and complement that thyself. So if we are always growing and we invest time and effort into knowing ourselves, and then we have a body or other people around us that we trust and can give us feedback when we need it, and that's what we call the trinity of self-awareness. So here's the question. And the question is, think of a challenge that you're facing today and pick your top 2 to 3 values and ask yourself, how are these values helping me overcome this challenge? And what helps me uphold these values? Or perhaps you can think of a client of yours as an example.
One of the things I love to do is to have a conversation with one of my values and just imagine, what would my value of courage say to me, or what would my value of creativity inspire me to do in this situation. And it really helps me see the challenge from a new perspective.
Love that, Carissa. I really do like that. What would this, okay, say that again. What would my value of courage? I'm typing it in the chat. Tell me to do? Was that the question?
Yeah, what would my value of courage say to me in this situation?
Anybody?
Are you asking the same question?
Yes. Yes, Mike.
I would say in our role in a nonprofit, obviously we're servants every day, and values would be caring for others and making them feel special, especially during these tough times when people have a lot of stress, depression, emotions, worries about their jobs, their family members. So along those lines, we try to do something at least every week to get Al up and to make people feel special. Everything from toilet paper parties where we hand those out to dressing up for St. Patrick's Day. I think on Easter, I let everybody crack raw eggs on my head at work just to get their mind off of it. We just gave out COVID goodie bags with toilet paper, paper towels, sanitizer, gloves, masks, all those things. Something every week to make people feel like winners and that we care and that we show.
Mike, what is the organization where you work?
Work for the San Antonio Lighthouse for the Blind. So we're a
That's awesome.
manufacturer in the city of San Antonio, making hundreds of thousands of pieces of gear for the military uniforms and those kind of things with people who are blind. And we use the profits to provide free services to people blind of all ages all throughout San Antonio.
Then you know my buddy Bob.
And is he really your buddy? That's going to change my opinion of you.
He's one of my neighbors.
Yeah. I know him pretty well. He's only been there 10 years.
So Mike, in the example that you just shared, what values were in place?
The values are really caring for others and doing our best to make them feel special as many times as we can. So that we show every day that we care and that we're their servants.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I applaud that. Thank you for all you do.
Raw eggs were not a lot of fun, but
All right. So,
Susanna, I have a more mundane example.
please, Martha.
This is very mundane, so apologize. I have a coachee that I'm coaching from a nonprofit. I do this pro bono, and I'm proud of how, you know, all the courage he's had and all the work he's done. But lately he's been canceling his sessions. And I was unsure, you know, like what to do. I'm going to contact the organization because he's canceled several sessions, or he just no show, you know, there's no show, no answer, nothing. So he contacts me a few minutes ago. He says, hey, I would love to have a session with you at 1 o'clock. I had to go to my values here. And that was a challenge for me because I'm normally the yes girl, you know, yes, 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 of course, of course, of course. And I thought, okay, my values, trustworthiness. I strive to be trustworthy, and if I commit myself to something, I stick to it, right? But at the same time, I think that my coachee might benefit from the same values. So I think, well, this is not a situation where I would say yes. Then I go to service. How can I serve my client better? You know, he needs me, but at the same time, this could turn into a learning experience. Then courage, like Carissa said, it's gonna be a hard conversation. I'm gonna have to have with him, but I'm gonna say no. This is the very difficult thing for me to do. So I'm sharing my experience with you. I don't know if this applies to what you wanted to do, Susanna, but.
Of course it does, Martha, and it's not mundane at all, because I think many of us may have found ourselves in that same situation, right? And it's your client, and your coaching is about service to others, right? And saying no, it's a hard thing to do. But then, you know, what are your filters to make that decision? And so if you use a filter of your values, you're always going to make the right decision.
Thank you. I feel much better after that.
All right. And so just to wrap up, I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes from Lao Tzu. Watch your thoughts, for they become your words. Watch your words, for they become your actions. Watch your actions, for they become your habits. Watch your habits, for they become your character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. And again, you know, I can personally tie this with self-awareness. because the way I think about myself and the awareness I have of how others think of me, it's really will change or modify the way I show up. And that will reflect, on all my actions and habits and the person I am and how I want to be perceived.